Good afternoon, everybody. I'm so glad that you all voted early so that you could concentrate your attention on today's presentation about former Southport Mayor Leonard T. Yaskell. The presentation includes several short video clips. The clips take up a lot of computer memory. So what I've done is I've broken the presentation into two parts. So as I get about halfway through, after 6 or so slides, I'll stop the first half and then load the second half of the presentation. It really shouldn't be too much of a disruption if I can actually do it correctly. Before I really get started with the portrayal of Leonard T. Yaskell, I wanted to explain to you why I chose Leonard Yaskell as someone I wanted to portray. I know you really, and folks that know me out there really would be surprised that I'm saying this, but I'm really not a very good actor. No, it's true. So I wanted to, I was concerned about that I would portray someone and they would have a lot of family in the area, and then people would be upset with me. The other thing I was thinking about when coming up with portrayal of Leonard T. Yaskell was, I don't really have much of a very good of any Southern drawl. So I thought, since I sound like a Yankee and I am a Yankee, maybe I should look for a Yankee to portray. So I spent about a year actually searching for a character that I'd be comfortable portraying. And I think being comfortable with the character you're portraying is really critical to doing a portrayal of someone from the past. And I think I best say it by saying you really have to be comfortable when you're borrowing someone else's shoes. And if you ask me for my list of tips on doing a video of someone, I still would have to go back to being comfortable portraying that individual. And I am very comfortable with Leonard T. Yaskell, and you'll find out more of that as we go along. All right, I said it'd take about a year to find him, and I finally did find the reference that led me to Leonard T. Yaskell. I was going through the 5-volume chronicles of Southport, a chronology of Southport by Bill Reeves, and I found this entry, the entry up at the top of your screen. 1929, January 24th, Mayor and Mrs. L.T. Yaskell left Southport for a month's visit at their old home in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. They made the trip by automobile. When I saw this entry, I thought I might have found the right person to portray. You see, I'm a fellow coal cracker, and I was eager to find out more about him. Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania is across the Susquehanna River from my hometown of Kingston, Pennsylvania. So it's relatively small community, and whether we've even seen a coal mine in our lives or not, we still think of ourselves as coal crackers. The car in the photo, and the way it was photo, that's a Yaskell's automobile. A photo was taken in front of their house on Caswell Street in Southport. That automobile may be actually the Essex automobile that Louise and Leonard Yaskell drove back and forth on their trip to Wilkes-Barre. Now I'd like to introduce you to Leonard T. Yaskell. This is Leonard T. Yaskell. I was the former mayor of Southport. I lived in Southport for quite a number of years with my wife Louise and also our niece Gwendolyn.
I came to Southport right after the First World War, WW1, or what some fool called the war to end all wars. During the war, I was a Marine corporal, and I was on the USS Charleston for most of the war period. During that time, I was a corporal. I was in charge of a gun crew on the Charleston. During that time, we did two convoy missions to France, and then after the hostilities ended, we brought occupation troops over to France and took the combat veterans home. It was quite a thrill and quite an honor to bring those veterans. But I came here to Southport. I was selling groceries at that time. I was selling produce, and I met Louise Stanland, and we got along just fine, and she was the prettiest woman I ever saw. So she stole my heart, and I was a very lucky man to marry Louise, and kind of in that way become a citizen, if you will, of Southport. Louise and I, we did not have any children, but we were. I said Gwendolyn, we were very thrilled because Gwendolyn, her niece Gwendolyn, was a big part of our lives. Gwendolyn was the daughter of Louise's sister, Alnita. Unfortunately, Alnita died when Gwendolyn was only one year old. And so the St. George family and the Stanlands and Louise and I came together, and we all kind of jointly brought Gwendolyn up, and she was always a real pleasure to be with. You may know her, or your mom and dad may know her as Gwendolyn St. George Dixon.
Okay, in the clip, Mayor Yaskell mentions that Gwendolyn's mother, Alnita, died when Gwendolyn was only 1 year old. Gwendolyn paid tribute to the mother that she never really knew by naming her baby daughter Alnita. Young Alnita Dixon, like her mother and her grandmother, was very well liked, and some of you may remember her as Alnita Dixon Crow. In the next clip, Mayor Yaskell talks about what life was like in Wilkes-Barre for immigrants from Eastern Europe.
But I'm kind of ahead of myself in my story. I'm not from Southport. I'm from Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. That's where I was born. My father was Mika Yaskell, and he married my mother Mary in about 1893 or so. Yeah, I believe that was it, 1893. Now, I was born in Wilkes-Barre in 1898. I had two older brothers, and then two younger sisters came along. So there was my father Mika, my mother Mary, and the five children. Now, my father worked in the coal mines. These were hard coal mines. These are mines that went down thousands of feet, hundreds and thousands of feet into the earth. It was hard work, and it's interesting. We were immigrants. They called us hunkies because we were from Poland and Slovakia and so on. So we were known as hunkies. And the native folks, the folks who were in Wilkes-Barre before us, they didn't really care for us much. They appreciated that we went down and worked the mines for them, but other than that, that was about what they saw as the only use that we had. And you know, they said we weren't good enough to be Americans. we were stupid, and on and on. In fact, this is interesting, the head of immigration for the United States government in 1921 said that your immigrants from Eastern and Southern Europe were not mentally, did not have the mental capacity to be a good American citizens, and that we would ruin American society over time. That was kind of the atmosphere. A lot of our friends that came over with my parents from Poland, they stayed a short while and they were treated so bad they just went back. They just went back home. About a third of the people who came over ended up going back. Plus, the work in the mines was hard. It was hard work. In fact, many of the men did not speak English at all, or not very good English, and so they would say, "Hard work, any kind, any time, hard work."
At that time that he's referring to, Mary Yaskell's family and extended family lived in Wilkes-Barre, what's called Wilkes-Barre Township. It was very close to the anthracite coal mines where his father Mika and perhaps even Leonard as a boy worked. As you may know, anthracite coal burns very, very pure and burns with a blue flame. The interesting little story, the Glen Alden Coal Company used the blue flame as a marketing tool, and they advertised their coal as blue coal. To draw customers, they even put a little bit of blue dye on the coal to give it a blue tint. And of course, they charged just a little bit more for their dyed blue coal. Many households filled up their coal bins with Glen Alden Coal Company's blue coal at the time. Slide here, the 9 million new immigrants came into the United States between 1900 and 1910. The Yaskells predated that. They were the last decade of the 19th century. But the Yaskells were immigrants, and they were what they were called new immigrants. And like today, a part of the American story in the late 1800s and early 1900s was about immigrants. The new immigrants at that time, like the Yaskells, came from mostly from Southern and Eastern Europe, Italy, Russia, Poland, Romania, Slovakia. Also, at that time, were still a number of immigrants coming from Ireland. Most of the immigrants were Catholic, and some were Jewish. In many ways, the new immigrants were quite different from the Western and Northern European immigrants who came before them. They brought different traditions, beliefs, norms. Most were Catholic, and the United States at the time was mostly Protestant. But like the immigrants of today, they too were looking for opportunity for their families. They were hard workers, and America really needed their labor. However, also like today, the new immigrants were denigrated, which seems pretty ironic because they were so necessary to American prosperity. Those mines and the steel industry, factories, they needed the labor that those new immigrants brought into the country. One of the comments you'll hear today in Wilkes-Barre and in other parts of the country, you often hear someone say, unlike today, my ancestors were legal immigrants and they followed the law, not like those people coming today. Well, that's a bit of an oversimplification of the situation. And I say that because until quota laws were passed in the early 1920s, there were no laws determining legal and illegal status. Essentially, that meant that immigrants were immigrants. But that changed in 1921 and then in 1924. In 1924, quota laws were passed by Congress. These laws severely limited the number of immigrants from Southern and Eastern European countries, while increasing the number allowed from Northern and Western European countries. So, as an example, if your ancestors arrived at, let's say, Ellis Island before 1924, and they were healthy, they were admitted into the United States. In fact, records show that annually, only 2 to 3% of immigrants coming into America were sent back, with one exception, and that was the Chinese Exclusion Act. Why did the United States set quota laws? These laws that set a limit by country, and Eastern and Southern European countries had very low limits, and Northern and Western European countries had very high limits. The laws reflected the common feeling of the day. As Mr. Yaskell talked about, the common view was that new immigrants would not become good Americans. And in fact, in 1907, the Commissioner General of the U.S. Immigration, he did say that the physical and mental quality of people we are now receiving is much below that of those who came in the past. And they are a serious threat to American society and culture. But we're going to talk about the Yaskells coming to North Carolina. And I think you can see from the attitude and the working in a coal mine, hundreds, thousands of feet down the earth, they had several reasons to be pleased to be coming to a farm in North Carolina. The bottom half of the slide, titled Luzerne County, PA. Luzerne County is Wilkes-Barre is the county seat of Luzerne County, and Kingston, one of the communities in the county. The newspapers at that time never seemed to skip any opportunity to single out foreigners. And here are some of the quotes from the Wilkes-Barre Record newspaper. Foreigners, a lower order of being. 7 foreigners arrested. Drunken fight among foreigners. Man beaten to death. 4 foreigners arrested. So that was repeatedly the news in the local newspapers. However, today, the Luzerne County website says, celebrating the diversity, says, because of immigrants, Luzerne County has an incredibly rich and diverse culture. You can see the statistics there with the county population increasing by 80%. Kingston, my hometown, the increase was almost 20%, going from 2,400 people in 1900 to 6,600 residents in 1910. Mr. Mary Yaskell is now going to talk about the family moving to St. Helena.
Well, let's get beyond that, because happily what happened is a friend of my father's told him about St. Helena, North Carolina. And St. Helena, North Carolina, and that's real close to Wilmington. Mr. Hugh McCrae, he was selling farmettes, what you would today call farmette. So he would sell a house and 10 acres of land, good land, for $240. And you paid $90 down, and then the rest in equal payments over time. Well, the family moved down to North Carolina. We changed our name from Yaskell to Yaskell, right? Just to make it a little bit easier for you folks. Right? Unfortunately, my father died shortly after we arrived in North Carolina. He had the black lung disease, which a lot of the miners suffered with and died from the black lung. You know, it's a shame because my father was a farmer in Poland, and that's what he had envisioned. He could come to North Carolina and work on top of the ground instead of under the ground in a mine. So, but with the 5 children and my mother working together there at our little farm in St. Helena, we made it work, and we did well. And you know, World War One came, and I went off to war, and then after I came back, I didn't really want to work in the field, so I was able to get myself a job still with the McCrae family, but a job selling produce in the areas in towns like Southport around this part of North Carolina. So I came to Southport in the early 1920s, and that's when Louise and I met. Of course, she was a local. She was native to the town, and I was what they called a newcomer, or some folks called us come-heres. He comes here from Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. Little story about that. 5-6 years after we were married, and we were running a grocery store, and the grocery store was doing really well. We took a month off. Had somebody else. Probably at that time, Gwendolyn wasn't quite old enough, but one of her uncles run the grocery store for us for that month. Anyway, we took our Essex automobile. We had a nice looking automobile, that Essex was, and we took a 1-month trip from Southport, North Carolina to Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. And we got to Wilkes-Barre, and we met I had to be able to introduce Louise to every member of my family, to the aunts, to the uncles, to the cousins. And Louise was shocked. I had more relatives than there were people in Southport. So, but that was a good time. And over the years, we would be with those relatives.
St. Helena, you may be interested, the village of St. Helena is in Pender County. It's south of Burgh and about 20 miles, as the slide says, north of Wilmington. The community of St. Helena was developed for immigrants by, as the mayor said, by Hugh McCrae, Wilmington businessman. In 1905, McCrae laid out farms in 10-acre plots, and also built a loading depot was built next to the railroad, and streets and public areas were laid out. Large barns were built in which mules, wagons, plows, and other farm equipment were kept and rented to the new residents until they could purchase their own. The community was named St. Helena for an Italian queen, and 6 streets were given Italian names. The first efforts to attract residents to St. Helena brought families directly from northern Italy. As time went on, other people came, most of them from Southern and Eastern Europe, from Austria, Belgium, Bulgaria, Czechoslovakia, Greece, Hungary, Poland, Russia, Ukraine, Yugoslavia. With their arrival of so many different ethnic groups, the community of the mixture of the intertwining of cultures and traditions and cuisines and languages really made that community of St. Helena what in St. Helena they now call a community of many nations. On the photographs on the slide, the one on the left is the front page of a brochure, and the photo. This brochure was distributed to northern cities in the United States, to cities in the Midwest, and also to Europe. What they would do they would put the brochure promoting St. Helena, promoting having a farm, your own farm, but they would put the brochure in the produce crates that they were shipping up to those locations. And then the workers would be unload the crates and move them around and such, and they would see those brochures. I have to imagine that one of Leonard's father's friends may have gotten a brochure and passed it on to Mika, and that's how he found out about St. Helena. The village of St. Helena became incorporated finally in 1988. It encompasses 6 miles of land, and in 2019 had a population of 427 people. Okay, we're going to take a break.
When we returned from that trip, I was soon asked to be run as a county commissioner, and for Brunswick County. And over a period of time, I became the chairman of the county commissioners. And then in 1935, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, he appointed me as the postmaster here in Southport, as postmaster. And that's a position I held for 10 years, from 1935 to 1945. And you know, at that time, there was not home delivery. So everyone in town would periodically come to the post office for their mail, or they would bring mail that they wanted to send. So as postmaster, I was the postmaster. I was also the fellow that swept the floor and took care of all the mail. And thank God it didn't snow, because I'd be out there shoveling the snow too, if that was the case. But I did get to meet everybody in Southport. And one of the things we talked about most, especially with the men would come in, was fishing, because I was one of the best fishermen in town. I also like to talk a little baseball too, because back up in Wilkes-Barre, I was known as one of the best baseball players in town. Now, not bragging, just saying. So the job as postmaster, of course, you know the dates. I said from 1935 to 1945. So that's during the Depression, and then it's during the entirety of World War II. Well, as the postmaster, I became the federal government, if you will, in Southport. So when there was a rationing board to be established, back here in Southport, though, when we returned from that trip, I was soon asked to be run as a county commissioner, and for Brunswick County. And over a period of time, I became the chairman of the county commissioners. And then in 1935, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, he appointed me as the postmaster here in Southport, as postmaster. And that's a position I held for 10 years, from 1935 to 1945. And you know, at that time, there was not home delivery. So everyone in town would periodically come to the post office for their mail, or they would bring mail that they wanted to send. So as postmaster, I was the postmaster. I was also the fellow that swept the floor and took care of all the mail. And thank God it didn't snow, because I'd be out there shoveling the snow too, if that was the case. But I did get to meet everybody in Southport. And one of the things we talked about most, especially with the men would come in, was fishing, because I was one of the best fishermen in town. I also like to talk a little baseball too, because back up in Wilkes-Barre, I was known as one of the best baseball players in town. Now, not bragging, just saying. So the job as postmaster, of course, you know the dates. I said from 1935 to 1945. So that's during the Depression, and then it's during the entirety of World War II. Well, as the postmaster, I became the federal government, if you will, in Southport. So when there was a rationing board to be established, I established the rationing board, whether it was for tires or for for food or for whatever. And as correspondence would come in and announcements would be to be made for a different program or a different purpose from the federal government, I made those announcements. I worked very closely with oh darn, I'm going to think his name, Erickson, who was the mayor of Southport at that time, and Mr. Erickson was a immigrant, I believe, from Norway, and he and I got along just fine and became good friends. He was the captain of a pogie boat. You know what pogie are, don't you? Yeah, the pogie's a fish that you extract the oil from, and also then take the bones and everything and crush it up, and it's used for fertilizer. But those pogie boats would come into Southport, and that was the industry in Southport for those times. Those pogie boats would come in, and you could sometimes smell them coming in. You not only hear them, you could smell them. But that smell, as strong as it was known as the smell of money in Southport. So that was interesting. And when I say I was the best fisherman, I'm not counting those fellows who were the captains and the crews for those pogie boats. I went inland to places like Rice's Creek, and I fished there. Yeah, maybe chase an alligator away once in a while, but the fishing was really, really good.
Okay, folks, I thought I was so good in that clip, I just would play it again for you. I don't know what you are seeing, but I've also on my screen is seeing yellow lines and the name Gary Cup. Don't know what that was all about. Okay, this slide kind of listing some of the activities of Mayor Yaskell over the years, and to kind of break him down, he was a very, very busy guy. In business, of course, he was a grocery store owner, a restaurateur, head of the local chamber of commerce, public servant. Of course, we know he was the mayor of Southport. He was chairman of the Brunswick County Commissioners and the postmaster for the city. He was also involved in charitable activities, including the Poppy Committee, Disaster Relief, United Way, the USO Board, and then community development, being chairman of the Dozier, of the Board of Trustees of the Dozier Memorial Hospital, Save the Railroad Committee, the Property Tax Citizens Committee, and the Wildlife Committee. Indeed, a very busy man. This slide there's two parts to it. On the left-hand side are different stories written about, most of them written by Bill Kazaya about Leonard Yaskell and fishing in the area. Bill Kazaya, you may recognize the name as Kazaya Park on West Moore Street in Southport, and that park, of course, is named after him. Or you may have heard Bill Kazaya called Southport's one-man chamber of commerce, as he was always promoting Southport to anyone and everyone that he met. Despite the fact that Kazaya was deaf, he was the founder of the State Port Pilot and later worked as a reporter for the Pilot. And he wrote a column titled The Roving Reporter. Many of his roving reporter columns had stories were about fishing, and many of those were about Mayor Yaskell. There's two of my favorite lines from those stories. The first one I'll read to you is, Kazaya wrote, Yaskell has the ability to tell anybody everything that nobody else knew about fishing. And then the second one I thought is interesting. Maybe you've heard this before, but Kazaya wrote, writing about Yaskell, says, every community should have one man like LT Yaskell, and one is enough. So you can see that the little bit of humor there that Keziah and Yaskell must have been indeed very, very good friends. The photograph on the right is, of course, the way it was column, and this was a photograph from 1941. In the caption, the people are identified. The man on the far left in the chair is Paul Fulldale. He was identified in the caption as a seafood dealer. The man standing in the background, many of you may remember well, as that's Robert Bobby Jones. At that time, he was superintendent of construction at Fort Caswell. Bobby Jones just passed away, I don't know, a year and a half or so ago. On the couch, the man on the left is Davis Herring, and he was the constructioneer at Fort Caswell. Leonard Yaskell, is the postmaster, is there on the center of the couch with the white shirt on, and L.C. Fergus with a sweater on the right-hand side of the couch, and Dr. Fergus was a physician in Southport. Okay, the Yaskells, both Louise and Leonard, left Southport in 1946 and moved to East Orange, New Jersey.
So we worked through World War II, and then in 1946, my mother and my brother wrote that my mother would like me to come up to East Orange, New Jersey, because my mother and my brothers had purchased the Brick Church stop, or the restaurant at the Brick Church stop on the commuter line going into New York City. So the restaurant, named after a local church, the Brick Church, this restaurant, my family ran the restaurant. Now, you've got a picture, and I'm sure you haven't done it yourself. I'm sure you've seen pictures and photographs, and maybe that new television thing, maybe you saw it there. But people going into New York City and coming out of New York City, I'll tell you, real estate and you're running a restaurant, location, location, location. That was the word of the day. And we did really well. Gwendolyn came up and worked with us, and well as her fiance, Mr. Dixon, and the whole family prospered. So we stayed there for 20 years. Now we would come back to Southport so I could show the fellas what they needed to know about the new fishing techniques, things of that nature. But we spent 20 years up there. And then in the early 1960s, it was time to retire. So Louise and I retired. And what did we do? Yeah, you got it. We moved back to Southport. And we lived over here on North Atlantic Avenue, which at one time was called Pot Street. Now, actually, I'm not sure I like the idea to change the name from Pot Street to Atlantic Avenue. Everybody has an Atlantic Avenue, but very, very few communities have a Pot Street. All right? And besides, Joshua Potts was one of the founders of Southport. So, anyway, I divert. Came back, and I forgot to mention before I left. In 1939, I was head of the Board of Trustees of the county hospital. And in 1939, the trustees, we all worked together, and we changed the name of the hospital to the J. Arthur Dozier Memorial Hospital. And the hospital became part of the Southport community. And I really feel, I really was committed to public service. As you can see with my background in the military, and then serving as mayor, as a county commissioner, and postmaster. But I truly think one of the best things, the thing I should say the proudest of, is the establishment of the J. Arthur Dozier Hospital and the positive role that it's played in the community over.
Okay, the Yaskell family business was as the mayor said, a restaurant located at the Brick Church Station in East New Orange, New Jersey. The station is on a very busy commuter line into New York City, and the station was named after the church that you can see in the picture. It was the Second Presbyterian Church of Orange. Today, the station remains a very busy commuter station, and statistics from 2017, the number of boardings were well over 2,500 people a day. When the Yaskells came back to Southport, again, Leonard Yaskell becomes the chairman of the Dozier Memorial Hospital. And at that time, the efforts were put into modernizing the hospital. In the photograph here, Leonard is giving an award or an accommodation to Vera McKeithen, who's in the center. And I'm sorry, I do not know the name of the other woman. And of course, the portrait hanging above them is a portrait of J. Arthur Dozier. Of course, in addition to his work with the hospital, Leonard also spent much of his time fishing the creeks and ponds in the local area. Well, you know, he was still the best fisherman in the area. Unfortunately for Southport and us, Mayor Yaskell passed in 1986 at the age of 88. To end, I want to share with you what James Harper wrote about his friend Leonard T. Yaskell. Leonard T. Yaskell, a traveling salesman who came to town in the early 1920s, liked the place and decided to settle here, and stayed on to become one of Southport's most valuable citizens. That is a quick synopsis of the life of Leonard T. Yaskell, who died at his home Friday at the age of 88. Some of the highlights were his election to the office of mayor of Southport, chairman of the Brunswick County Board of Commissioners, and postmaster of Southport, when the post office was the hub of activity in this community. This fails to mention what probably was his interest of greatest public service, Dozier Memorial Hospital. He was chairman of the Board of Trustees when it was built, and probably was more responsible for its being here than any other layman. Following an absence of several years while he was in business in East Orange, New Jersey, he returned home and picked up where he had left off with the hospital and helped make possible the stability and modernization which it now enjoys. He was a friendly, outgoing fellow who helped many people of both high and low estate solve problems that few others knew of. He was a leader in business and civic activities, never for personal gain, but always for the best interest of his hometown. He lived a long and useful life and enjoyed every minute of it. And in the process, he helped make Southport a better place. Surely that's a fitting description of Mayor Leonard T. Yaskell, and a memory of what any of us would indeed see as a life well lived. That's the end of my presentation about Mayor Yaskell. And certainly, if you have any questions, I'd be glad to try to answer them.
Bob, we got a question. Pat and Jim Conklin want to know, how long did he serve in the Marine Corps?
I don't know exactly from what is written about it. I think it was perhaps a 2 to 3 year period. He was definitely not a career in the Marines.
And they also want to know why his mom left St. Helena.
That's
why and when. They asked why twice, so maybe why and when.
I'm sorry, say it again.
When did his mom leave, and do we know why?
Yeah, It's a good question. I don't know exactly when she leaves. I do know that she, a few years later, she is in, actually before she went to East Orange, New Jersey, and after she had left St. Helena, she was in Kingston, Pennsylvania, and she lived on South Goodwin Avenue, probably right next door to Bev Jones, who's laughing there. She was a very seemingly, I don't have a whole lot about her, but the little you know, that she must have been quite a person, quite a woman, quite a leader of that family. The boys did what they were told, but I don't really have more details than that. One of the interesting things, you follow the Yaskell family through the decades of the census, is their when they first came over, they were from Russia, Poland. Then for a while they were from Germany, but then World War II broke out, and they went. Their census form changes again. They were, regardless of changing their their ethnic background, they seem to be really good, solid people.
So I guess I missed it. When exactly was he mayor? Was it before he was postmaster or after?
He was mayor in 1929 to 31.
So before.
Maybe 27 to 31. I think it was 2 terms. So he was about 29 years old, and he had come to Southport maybe 6, 7 years before he was elected mayor. Anyone else? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bob. Spoken as a coal cracker. Nice job.
Thank you, Bev.
I thought you did an excellent job, Bob, and I'm going to miss Mayor Yaskell. I just found him really delightful. His little, you know, he was so proud of himself with his fishing and just seemed like a real nice guy.
Yeah.
I'm going to miss him.
I could see why you could feel like you want to portray him.
Yeah,
He's like a really nice guy.
He's very, very gregarious, and I think that's what he was.
That's a good job, Bob.
Excellent.
Thank
A
you.
lot of research.
Working on it for a while.
I guess so.
Hey, Larry, how are you?
Unmute.
Hey, Bob.
Did you know Mary Yaskell?
No, I don't know. It'll be before my time. Believe it or not.
To tell you all the truth, half of my hometown is here watching this today. Both Jack and Beverly, and Larry, we all went to high school together. And here we are.
And also love Southport.
Okay,
Good job, Bob.
thank you.
Excellent.
So,
Thank
Bob, what do we have coming up next?
Coming up next is Pat Kirkman.
That's right. Our next living voice is Pat.
And the Tuesday talk is Claire McNaught, and this is an encore presentation. She's going to be doing talking again about Moravian Christmas traditions, and that's the second Tuesday. I mean, the date is failing me. 10:30 in the morning, and Claire does a fantastic job, and it really is interesting if you are familiar or you're not that familiar with Moravian Christmas. She does a great job, and it's really interesting.